We started with some dribbling, in group of 4 or 5 people, depending on the numbers. They had to steal the ball to each other, so you can see how many different types of footwork and dribbling emerge from below without our instruction and prescriptive feedback. And I think to start a practice with something like this, obviously you can have a lot of different ideas with different skills involved. It's always a good start to make them think and more involved. Then we move on to some dribbling 101. I divide the court in 3 areas: the paint, the line from the sideline to the side of the paint, and the other. So we have 3 areas. You can constrain how many crossover can they have, what type of crossover can they have, only in front of the body, only a protected crossover. If you want to specify which type of crossover they can have, you can do that. As you can see also some good defenses in here. So we move on, adding a third player in front of the 101. This player can ask for the ball or not ask for the ball. If he asks for the ball, the teammate has to watch him and pass the ball to him. You get it back and he finishes 1-1. What we want from them is to look up and see what's happening on the court, but we try to achieve this by putting on something that is representative of the game, at least a little bit, instead of like yelling at them or just showing them numbers. Now here it's good activity for the time and task. You have multiple group of people playing on the same basket at the same time, so it's a good activity also for like having them self-organize. They start all together with the hands on the ball. One of the offensive player, when he wants, they take a dribble back. The constraint is that both the offensive player has to touch outside the three-point line, and then they play one-on-one from there. The idea is to make them start with a bad spacing, like they're all together, and we want to see which kind of solutions they find. Do they find a good space between them, a good passing angle, or as you see in these occasions, they settle for maybe a jumper that is not what we want, but it's something that in this phase we accept. We let them explore different options. Now, the next 2 passes you're gonna see from me are a perfect example of a technique that emerged because the defense put you in that position, and it's something that the fake that they use, something that would be very hard to replicate in like an on-air environment. Now, what I did right now is to change the point system. I wanted them to explore some, different selection of passes. And so we added 1 point more for every alley-oop pass or behind the back pass. So you're gonna see some solutions that are creative. They're not gonna be perfect every time in picking the right pass, but what we want in this moment for them is to explore different solutions, and later in their process, they become better at reading every time the right solution. Then we move on to some guided defense. We didn't stay a lot on this, but we wanted them to have some contested layup. We wanted them to how to use your body, how to create a good angle of driving in these situations. And also one of the reasons why I love these is because they get self-organized. As you see, 2 players just crash into each other. And this is something that if we want to improve our practice in the long run, we need to spend some time fixing this situation, and the player need to become better at self-organizing. Now, speaking of abilities that emerge through constraint of the defense, look at the player on top of the key who is using a reverse start. That is something that we haven't teach, and simply because the defense is in that position and he used what he knows to come up with that solution. Now, a very simple activity. The defense start outside the three-point line. The offense start dribbling. So we want them to, as you see here, do some fake of the dribble, try to use their body a little bit to trick the defender, and then they have to finish the rim. Simple. Here you see a player that doesn't recognize to be open, especially on the left side, to finish with the left hand. Again, it's a good example of self-organizing. If you start when a teammate is starting, it's going to be harder for you to score. Look at here, the fake. The defender moves, and then I attack when he's retracting. Is a perfect example of like how to get open, how you use your body and fakes to get open. After like 5 minutes of this, I spoke with their usual coach, and he told me that he is working a lot on like an anticipated layup, with just one step instead of the normal 1-2. And so we say, okay, if you score in that way, is 1 point more. And then we start to see automatically some of those shot arises. So it's a good example of how you can mix something that maybe you have taught in a traditional way and then use a change in the point system as like a torch, a guiding light to lighten up some options, make them worth more so the players can be more primed to look out for those options. And by doing this, becoming better at perceiving the affordances. Now, the starting point is the same one as the activity before. Now, what we do is to add a teammate. So if I don't have a good shot because I don't create enough separation with the defender, I can decide to pass the ball to him, sprint outside the 3-point line, and reattack a second dynamic one-on-one. In this moment, we prohibited to them to, maybe pass out and look for a steal inside. That is an option that you can use with your team. But we wanted them, as you see here, okay, I don't have a good shot, pass out, sprint out the 3-point line. Now is a little bit late doing that. And now I create a second dynamic one-on-one. Even if the shot is missed, the idea is right here. You're going to see it again in the next two clips. And then in the last clip, you're going to see an example of a player not perceiving the right space and the right affordances, and is going to pass the ball when maybe it was open to score, or maybe if he wanted to pass, he needed to do it in a different way because the pass turned out to be a turnover because his defender was right by his side. Now, these are the constraints of this game. The defense start on the side of the ball handler. The other three defenders have to start with at least 1 foot in the paint. If they are not in the right position, the ball handler can finish with a score. So we want him to be looking at all the defenders. But if they are inside, he cannot finish with a score the first time. He has to pass the ball out. So we want the other three teammates, in theory, to try to create a passing window, to break the three in a row, to use a terminology that I like from my friend Alex Sarama. And then from there, we play. The only difference that we have to the scoring system was that if you were able to have a domino sequence, so after the first pass, the ball doesn't stop, and I was the judge of that, the points were worth double, so 4 points and 6 points instead of 2s and 3s. You can see here some good backdoor actions, some nice off the ball activity. For under 13 group, I was quite happy with the result that we have over there. But another important component of this Mozart game for me was that the spacing was different every time. And after every turnover or defensive rebound, who has the ball has to go find a spot on the 3-point line. We wanted to have 4 players outside the 3-point line. And from there, start immediately. So they can start when they have the defender on the side and all their teammates are outside the 3-point line. And the defense has to be smart, be inside the paint. Otherwise, if they're not quick enough to react from the switch defense to offense, offense to defense, they're going to be in trouble because the drive can end with layup. So I think that, again, we spoke about self-organizing before. This is another example of how you can create situations that help your team to become better at self-organizing in practice. And this is going to help you a lot during games. The last thing we did was a 5-on-5. I call it from bad to good because they started with a bad spacing all inside the 3-point line. I was calling out a name and throwing the ball in a different position. And I had asked them here to create a spacing. It can be 4 out, 1 in, 5 out. It depends what your ideal alignment and starting structure with your team is. But we were giving them 1 point more bonus, even if they didn't score in the end, if they were able to recreate that spacing in 3 seconds after I throw the ball on the court. So it's a good way when you're trying to implement a starting structure with a team to focus some of your points on that. Obviously, some of the points are going to be based on the result of the possession. We want that, but it's good to make them think, especially in the beginning where you have to install that principle to value that in your small set games by adding some points. And of course, in the end, I like to end all of my practices with a small debriefing. We add the players talk between each other in couple for 30 seconds. What is something that you learned today? Very generic question because this is not my group. Usually with a group that I coach throughout the year, I would like to go a little bit deeper with questions, and I ask them some cold calling, what do you think of this? And we come up with 3 main focuses from the practice, 3 things that I want them to bring home.